Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Crown and today we are going to have some more stories that I hope that you will enjoy. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to the channel, like the video if you enjoyed it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now, without further ado, let's go! First story. Racist boss harassed Puerto Rican employees and broke labor laws, ended up getting deported. I worked at a fairly well-known restaurant in a small northern New England city as an assistant manager. The owners were very successful restaurateurs with several successful non-chain establishments. I spent maybe a day or two a month in our location. The rest of the time there was a general manager in charge. We will call her Jan. Jan was about as type A as they come. She was a middle-aged woman, but beautiful and petite, and she always looked put together and primed. Jan had started with the owners a decade earlier in their first restaurant as a server and had worked her way up to general manager over the years. At first, I just thought she had extremely high standards, which I respected. I have high standards as well and take pride in my work. I have been impressed by how the kitchens were spotless. The staff was immaculate, like running a white gloved hand under the back of the oven and it comes back white kinda clean. And the food was always top quality. I had frequently been a customer and was thrilled that I got the job there. I have been in the business for a decade and that restaurant was the place in our area. I was so excited. Unfortunately, I quickly learned why everything is so shining and perfect. Jan was a tyrant. She was the kind of boss who soured the mood the entire staff like a storm cloud hovering over us that never went away. Nothing was ever good enough, and the standards changed from day to day. On a good day, she would shut herself up in the office and then leave early. Good days were very rare and could turn into bad days at the drop of a dime. On bad days, you couldn't be perfect enough, and she would come up with new rules and regulations just to punish people. If a host called out sick, they were literal children. She would berate them on the phone and make them cry. If a cook made a mistake on a plate, she would berate them in front of the staff, accuse them of doing it on purpose, and then give us all the silent treatment for hours after. Seriously, if someone's cash out was off even by a few cents, she would accuse them of theft and force me to cut down their hours. As a fellow manager, I was mostly spared her awful behavior, though I had to hear about her treatment from my staff almost every day. All of this was just run-of-the-mill bad boss stuff until it came time for our yearly staff evaluation meetings. And this is where Raul entered the story. Raul was a hard-working dishwasher who had moved to our state from Puerto Rico a few years earlier, and he spoke English with some difficulty. Whenever I had to go over anything official with him, we would have a co-worker translate between us to be sure we were both communicating clearly. Jan refused this courtesy to Raul, and this made his evaluation pretty difficult. Raul managed to communicate to us that due to recent cuts in his hours, he would be forced to get a second job to pay the bills. Something about this absolutely set Jan off. She told him she would fire him if he dared. I could see plainly on the intake paperwork in front of me that Raul had been hired with the understanding that it would be a full-time position. So I pointed that out, and Jan was furious, but agreed through gritted teeth that if Raul agreed not to get a second job, she would bump his hours up to at least 35 hours a week. It was stated as clear as day, and I documented it in my daily manager logbook. Work went on as usual after that, and I didn't think much of this meeting again for a few months. Another time, a while later, while filling out information for tax returns, Jan called me into the office. I could tell she had pulled the tiny room apart looking for something.
All the information about Puerto Rican employees is gone.
She told me it was a mixture of panic and suspicion. I looked at the files in question and they all seemed to be in order. So I was confused and told her I couldn't help. A few minutes later, I walked back into the office to find her arguing with Rosa, our most talented chef and a Puerto Rican native. Rosa was perfectly fluent in English.
No, Rosa.
Jan was speaking to Rosa as though she were hard of hearing or mentally slow.
Where is your green card?
What are you talking about? Rosa was confused.
Are you an illegal or something? Is that why one of you broke in here? To hide the proof?
Jan wasn't yelling, but her eyes were cold and flashing with rage. What? Rosa was starting to get angry now. It suddenly clicked for me. So I interrupted. Jan, you do realize that Puerto Rico is a United States territory, right?
Of course I know that.
Jan snapped back. Okay, so you know that Rosa has a social security number like any other American native.
Alright. Never mind, Rosa, you can go back to work.
Jan did not apologize for accusing Rosa of theft. I was so done with this place after that. Jan did all kinds of little things like that and she never apologized. I had already gotten a job offer for a place closer to my house when the final straw came. I was a closing manager one day and got in just before the dinner rush to see Raoul storming out the back door. He didn't speak much English, but his witch was very clear. Jan had lied about raising his hours to 35 per week, so Raoul had gotten the second job he talked about. When Jan found out, she fired him, but not before saying something about how all illegals are the same. She was really fixated on these American citizens being illegal aliens for some reason. By this point, I hated this woman too. She once told me my clothing made me look poor in front of the whole staff. I was wearing what she made me wear. Meanwhile, she wore open-toed shoes behind the line, which is against the health codes. And once her fake nail fell off into the clothesloe, she wouldn't let anyone toss it out after she retrieved it. This is just the tip of the iceberg. But I have a life to live. Since I knew I would be leaving soon anyway, I told Raoul he should go after our boss for wrongful termination since I had documented proof, with Jan's signature, that he had been promised more hours and that Jan had broken the agreement, not Raoul. The last time I saw Jan was on my way out of Raoul's lawyer's office, after giving a deposition about several labor laws she had violated, at least the ones that I knew about. Apparently there were many others she had broken in front of other employees. She couldn't even look me in the eye. The best part? At my deposition, I learned that Jan was actually the one who was illegally in the country. Her green card had recently expired. She was Canadian. She ended up being sent back to Canada as a result of this case and no one has heard from her since. Raoul was granted 6 months of unemployment pay, plus the restaurant had to pay his legal fees. They closed that location not long after. Maybe they should hire their managers more carefully next time. Jan, if you're reading this, I hope you pulled yourself together. I also hope you learned to wear closed-toe shoes behind the line. You wouldn't want to end up a huge, gigantic screw-up due to your own negligence, now would you? Next story. Crazy Karen wants my face mask, gets arrested for assaulting me and a police officer. This happened back when the pandemic was starting to get real. Those of you from the Midwest have probably heard of Hy-Vee. Well, today all Hy-Vee stores were giving away cloth face masks for free from the Iowa Department of Public Health. I live in West Des Moines and we have 3 Hy-Vee within a 10-minute drive and a drugstore. We went to the Hy-Vee closest to our house. The store had kept masks in a basket manned by an employee with a sign that said 1 per person. My dad and I each got one because he goes out the most to get groceries and supplies, and I'm immunocompromised. My dad decided that since we were already there, that he would go grab some stuff and I would go to the car. As I was leaving, through the doors comes Karen and her two goblins. She sees a mask in my hand and asks me where I got it. I told her that they were giving them away for free inside. And the following is a transcript of what happened.
Well, if they are free, you should give them to me because my angels deserve it.
No, they literally 10 steps away. Go get it yourself. Besides, I don't have a good immune system. I need this mask. I've been using a bandana.
Give it to me.
At this point, I try to leave using the other door, so I turn around and head towards that other side of the store. I'm someone that when in a fight to flight situation, I will always choose flight. Unbeknownst to me, Karen had sent her goblins to tackle me. They grabbed me, but I was able to fend them off. I'm 6'1", 220 pounds. I knocked the first kid into the checkout, and the other one fell onto the floor. I'm shocked and confused and don't even realize Karen is running full on to me. I notice at the last second and manage to dodge her. She goes slamming into the customer service desk.
He attacked me and my kids. Call the police.
And this is where the story gets interesting. I know a lot of people in the police force. My school resource officer and I have known each other since the 2nd grade. My friend's dad who lives up the street is a sergeant. Another friend's dad is a retired captain. So you could say I know a few people in the department. Unfortunately, I didn't know the officers that showed up. During all of this commotion, the kids tried to slip away but were caught by an employee. When the police showed up, this is what happened. For reference, the police officer 1 is a female and the second one is a male. Police officer 1 asks, "What's going on?" Karen goes,
He attacked me and my kids, throwing me into the desk and throwing my kids into the checkout and onto the floor.
"That's not true. I was leaving the store when she asked me for my mask. I told her that they are free just around the corner and that I would not be giving mine to her. I turned to go out the other door when her kids tried to tackle me. When I fended them off, she came barreling towards me but I ducked and she slammed to the customer service desk."
That's a lie. He's lying. I just wanted a mask for my angels.
The second police officer says, "Okay, why don't we see the tapes?" And Karen went as white as a ghost. I guess she did not realize that she was on video the whole time.
No, that's not necessary. I don't want to press any charges. Kids, let's go.
The manager tells her, "Ma'am, you're not going anywhere until these officers view the tapes. You just wait here. Officers, this way." Karen's face went from a demented, angry look to scared and worried look. About 5 minutes later, the officers came back out. One stays with Karen, while the other pulls me aside. The cop says, "So we looked at the tapes. It is exactly like you said. At this point, we will be writing her a disorderly conduct ticket. Do you want to press charges for the assault?" I thought about this for a minute or two and then decided, yes, I want to press charges. The minute Karen heard this, she went ballistic. The officer had to calm her down. When he went to put handcuffs on her, she kicked him and grabbed a basket of masks.
If my angels can't have them, then no one can have them.
And she grabbed the basket and started running to the door, knocking the employee down. Her kids were terrified, and outside she threw the basket in the air, contaminating the masks. The first police officer deployed her taser, bringing her to the ground. The second cop handcuffed her and took her to the police car. My dad had no idea what was going on and came to the checkout line to see me talking with the police. He asked me, "What happened?" The police officer explained what happened and what will happen next. That tells me, I leave you alone for 20 minutes and this is what happens? My dad and I have a really good relationship, and I've really always been a daddy's boy. So he's always pulling my leg about something or another. The other police officer at this point is confused with my dad's tone. He realizes that and says he's joking. I was joking, I like to pull his leg a lot. Seriously, Dad? Not the right time. We laugh and then go about our ways. Next story. Play illegal games, win legal prizes. This happened about a decade ago. I worked for a large drug chain as a frontline manager. For this chain, the pharmacist is the owner of the shop. They run it, but the company still owns the whole thing. I guess it's like they are a corporate franchise. Anyways, the shop had a history of not being able to keep a manager in the role I just took on for very long. The training was practically non-existent and nothing was documented. On was the show. One day within my first 3 months, I'm sick as a dog and can barely get out of bed. As it's a health and wellness business and as I couldn't work even if I wanted to, I called in to the back of the house manager. This manager acts as the assistant manager to the owner as they were real-life friends. I said I was sick and couldn't get to work. I was asked who would be covering for me as I had to open the shop every day. And I said I didn't know. I was told that as a manager, I was responsible for this and needed to find someone. Fair enough. Even though nobody told me about this, I pulled out my staff listing and found someone to cover my shift who had keys and could open the store. Keep in mind that most of my staff were part-time/students at the time. And I only had one full-time employee that worked Monday to Friday. When I got into work the next day, the assistant manager told me that I couldn't call in sick, and that the next time I called in sick, I shouldn't bother coming back. I was shocked, as this is very unprofessional, and I didn't expect it coming from the second in command at the store. My one full-time employee starts telling me that I'm the best manager they have had for the last 2 years. And during that time, they went through 6 managers before me. I'm told that I've done more in my time there than all the previous managers did in total. Things like having the staff cash out on company time, not making people stay to find errors/recount on their own time, basically not breaking labor laws. So the owner calls me into their office and tells me that due to my sick day, I won't be paid for it, as I'm still on probation and that the accountant who does the payroll will be instructed as such. This was unexpected as I'm a salaried employee and probation or not, I know this isn't right. But I agree and get on with my day. Being that there were lots of part-time/students that worked here, we had an actual punch clock to clock in and clock out for all employees, including me. Being a salaried manager, whenever one of my staff couldn't work, and if I couldn't find a replacement, I ended up covering that shift myself. I looked at it like an opportunity to get to know my evening staff better, as I usually never saw them. On the paycheck that my sick day happened, I also needed to cover a few extra shifts for other employees, as everyone seems to get sick at about the same time. And as a manager, I'm the one who totals up the time cards prior to giving them over to the accountant. These time cards cannot be faked, as they are physically punched and encoded with dates and times from the machine. I handed my team's time cards with mine on top of it to the accountant, who looks at me and reminds me about the instructions she's gotten from the owner. She didn't like it but had her orders. I tell her that I understand, and here is my time card. She looks at it, raises her eyebrows at me, and before she can ask a question, I remind her that I'm not a salaried employee, as I'm still on probation, and that normal pay rules should apply, even though this is illegal. She looks at me, smiles, and confirms that what she was told by the owner. It turns out that deducting the sick day I missed, but adding on the 3 extra shifts I had to work that period to cover for other staff not showing up, I ended up working 96 hours that payday. So because I wasn't salaried, the accountant paid me time and a half for the extra 16 hours I worked. Because I knew that these things weren't really legal, I decided I was done with this company and this boss. I emailed my friend who helped me get the job, who just happened to be the head of their corporate security, with the story I just told. I gave him permission to send it to whoever he thinks would need to see it. Later that week, I got a call from another employer asking if I could start immediately. I said yes, of course, and went back into work. This call happened just after I had gotten home from work. Yes, before cell phones were a thing. I walked into work, went into the back office to collect my personal effects, and came back out. My shift supervisor was perplexed as I had just left for the night. I shook his hand and told him that it was nice working with him. He was shocked and asked, "You're firing me?" I actually LOL'd at that and told him, "No, I'm quitting. You get to keep working here." I went to hand my keys and resignation to the night pharmacist and told him to pass it on to the owner. My letter consisted of, "I quit," signed my name. I went back a few weeks later to get some stuff. I still shop there as it's close to my home. And the one full-time employee says hi with a big smile. And he tells me the following in hushed tones. "A few days after you left, some suits from the head office came in, had a meeting with the owner and left. When the owner left after that day, they haven't seen the owner since. Seems the suits came and took the store away from them based on the owner's inability to keep your old position filled. Employee did not know about the email I sent to the head of security, but when I mentioned it, the employee lit up like a light bulb and said, 'So that's why.' The icing on the cake for me was that the owner knew about this connection I had with the head of security, as they were listed as a reference and the owner contacted them directly about the referral. Doing illegal stuff to someone with a direct link to the head of security is probably not a good idea." Next story. Told to change one student's grade, so I changed them all. I moved to a new state to take a high school teaching job in a rural town. I liked my fellow teachers and almost all my students, but this was a small town with the usual assortment of outsized attitudes. One student was particularly lazy. Her parents both worked in the small school district, admin at the high school, and teacher at the middle school. She rarely turned anything in on time, and what was turned in was generally rushed or incomplete as if she'd gotten the instructions secondhand. Somehow, though, she had straight A's in all of her classes. I quickly figured out why. When she turned in another late, incomplete assignment, and I very generously gave it a D, her overall grade in class dropped to a B. I was called in the next day to a meeting with the principal and both of her parents, who immediately complained I was being unfair and capricious with my grades. They accused me of not giving students the instructions, so I showed them the instruction paper, which I passed out and went over in class. They accused me of not giving her specifically a copy, but I remember handing it to her and I told them why. She was making out with her boyfriend when I was trying to go over the instructions. They didn't like hearing that part. They accused me of not being clear with the deadline, but it was the second line of the directions. They accused me of not fairly grading her work, but when I showed them her work, they clearly hadn't seen it before. I wondered whether I'd gotten assignments mixed up before I showed them her name on it. The principal asked me to change the grade in the gradebook. I asked about whether she'd have to redo the assignment first, but that was declined by her parents. I understand why my principal caved. It wasn't worth trying to fight two employees in a small, rural district already struggling to recruit people. So I went back to my classroom and changed every student's grade to a 100 in the gradebook. No special treatment. Even the ones who hadn't turned in a single thing got a perfect score. The fallout. Many students asked me why their grades changed, but I never addressed it. I would just brush them off by saying not to worry about it, though clearly rumors were spreading like wildfire in the small school, because even the secretary and the principal asked me about it later on. I only said that yes, I changed her grade. The principal looked like he wanted to ask me about why I changed all the grades, but he just shrugged and walked away. He never interfered in my grade book after that, and the student's parents transferred her out of my class, and her boyfriend also transferred the day later. No more PDAs in my class finally, so no complaints. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.